Welcome to The Difference Engine, the show for tech founders, investors, and innovators.
Today's guest is another man not from these parts, in this case, La Belle France.
Starting his LinkedIn profile with entrepreneur/VC/tech lover/sport addict, Ben Marrel's experience as a founder and his passion for entrepreneurship led him to co-found Breega, a fast-growing, founder-led, European-based VC specializing in financing tech startups from pre-seed to Series B.
Today, Ben's based in mostly London, with Breega also having offices in Paris and Barcelona, supporting highly promising startups with purpose, such as Cuvva, Exotech, Udel, Alice & Bob, 99 and Moneybox.
Moneybox, an app-based saving and investment company, has appeared in Deloitte UK's Technology Fast 50 for the fourth year running, climbing 19 places compared to last year, and has just secured a 550 million valuation ahead of a secondary share sale after it moved into profit.
Ben Marrel, welcome to The Difference Engine.
So the first thing we wanted to talk about was the state of early stage funding in Europe. Is it a fundamental barrier to category creation? Now, conventional wisdom in tech has it that founder involvement in funds is much more common in the US than Europe. This is a reason often given for the historical success of the US VC ecosystem and its ability to sustain a virtuous circle where proceeds from successful exits and earnings are ploughed back into creating successive and new ecosystems. According to today's guest, Breega was established to break the European tradition of financier-run investment funds to bring the operational excellence and real business experience of founders, as well as cash, to early-stage companies. 10 years on, the formula is working, with 700 million having been invested in what might be viewed as a contrarian approach. But running with the trends has never been in Breega's DNA. So, Ben, as tech comes to an inflection point and the industry asks, what's next? What do you see coming at us?
It's quite fascinating to actually look at what has been changing over the last few years. If you rewind a little bit, we had a first go at it back in the 2000s, and the bubble burst hit us very hard, right? We all need to bear in mind that the US they started tech and VC back just after World War II, so they've been at it for 70 or 80 years now, and it's all fresh. And my grandfather used to say, you don't make a baby in a month with 9 women. And it's impossible to fast forward this, right? It takes time to create, an ecosystem and, have, create companies and have exits and then have founders who go on the other side of the fence and, try to be investing in companies themselves. And it takes a bit of time. And obviously, I think Europe, and especially through the UK first, given the strong links between the UK and the US, have been able to fast forward that a little bit. With more experience coming from the US, with more sort of, US mindset. But A, we started later, and this we have to acknowledge that. And B, we don't have the same dynamics. I think, Europe is a constellation of countries and cultures and languages and frameworks that we need to circulate when, you're a US founder. It's a different approach to it. So, I think for a long time, the early stage investment was borne by, private equity and finance people, which, kind of felt normal, like it's a new asset class. And, you kind of come down the ladder and look at it from that lens. Our conviction at Breega, and it's always been mine. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years and I've created companies before Breega in the tech space. And it's always been, early stage investment, it's all about operations. It's not about finance. I mean, if you look at it, there's no finance, right? There's all red and no black in there. Like you're only investing for the future. So it's all about, how do you establish your vision and your mission as a company and your values, and how do you, hire the best talent out there, and how do you make sure you're actually solving a problem which is, painful enough so people, will pay for it ultimately. And big enough that, you can build a company that reaches, startup scale. and that's crucial.
What's interesting what you're saying there, Ben, is you're talking about the people aspects. You talked about the relationship between the UK and US, and then you very much focused on the people and sort of the law and it becoming culturally appropriate for people to start up companies and take this massive risk. Now, a decade in, some of your founding principles at Breega, funded by founders for founders, is a really strong message. And you started this partially, as I understand it, as a reaction against the finance bro type of funders that previously maybe tried to get involved in tech. Is that a fair characterization, Ben? And can you explain this Breega principle of founders first?
It comes two ways. I think, first of all, as you said, within the team, I think to us it was crucial and to have that sort of founder DNA within Breega, in and out, and the entire investment team at Breega is composed of ex-founders and operators in the tech space. So we really know what it takes to create a business from the ground up. And I think, it makes a huge difference to a lot of investors out there who probably don't have that particular knowledge. And once again, you need a lot of different pieces to make a puzzle. But having this one, is quite important to us. And we've seen it, along the years, both when we were on the other side of the tables and, sitting at board meetings with people who into Excel spreadsheets and try to make it work. But, when you go into operations, it's way more complicated than this, right?
And look, it works, right? Let's, it would be totally remiss of us if we weren't to mention your big success this week with Moneybox. I mean, just very briefly, that's a shining example. It's a British company, actually. But could you tell us a little bit about how that's worked so well?
Look, it goes back to the people. I mean, that's the point you made earlier. And I think it makes a huge difference. When I met Ben and Charlie back in 2017, they had just started the company and they were with this vision of bringing, wealth to the masses. They started with roundups and they had this approach of like, hey, can we make this, product, savings, available to everyone? So how do we build something that works for everyone? Because everyone deserves to be investing in its own future. I was totally bought in. I was like, look, guys, it's important to me as a human being to be able to back people who have these amazing visions going forward. And yes, it's tough. And yes, at the beginning, interest rates were nil. And therefore, they went through a lot of lows before, hitting, amazing highs like they do today. But we've always been here to back them and support them because once again, the vision was more than anything else. And that's why, to us and to me, like it's crucial. Like I'm when I invest into people, I invest into amazing people that can transform the industries they're in and, beat against the odds. And sometimes, it's tough. And sometimes you fail, but when you succeed, it's just massive.
Yeah, hats off to you and the guys.
Absolutely. I think in the current fintech environment, which is not particularly rosy, to get a 550 million valuation ahead of a secondary share sale is really quite amazing. And being in Deloitte's UK Technology Fast 50 for the fourth year running. So, well done on getting that going. One of the things that people might notice if they went to the Breega website was that something which appears central to Breega's investment philosophy is what you call full stack funding. Can you explain what this is and what it's designed to achieve, and crucially why it's different to other funding approaches?
As tech founders ourselves, we couldn't imagine a firm building a new firm that couldn't operate like a normal firm, let's put it this way. And in a lot of VC companies, partners pretend they do everything, right? So raise money, invest into companies, sit at their boards, and then help them in the day-to-day, which is impossible. I mean, you have way too much on your plate, and you're probably very good at something, but you can't be good at everything. So the vision from the get-go was to say, look, we're going to have a team dedicated to that portfolio support and make sure that we have the best operators on top of our investment team comprising of founders to support our startups, in their day-to-day. So, operations, recruiting your C-level, organization, how do you make sure, your whole structure as an org works and, compensation and all of that, your values and your mission alignment, to make sure that what you talk about out there is also, real in there when you're in the company. And that's crucial. And, we have a team of 10 people as of now, on our P&L just dedicated to our portfolio companies, which is unheard of. And we were one of the very, very first ones to put in place. So once again, it was a question of, walk the walk and not only talk the talk. And you can meet so many investors which are going to tell you, look, we're going to be supportive, we're going to be hands-on, and, blah, blah, blah. But, we all know it's blah, blah, blah.
When we were talking a few weeks ago about this, and we were really asking you, look, do you really get stuck in? Because everybody says they do, but we all know they probably don't. And you mentioned a specific example of a food delivery portfolio company that came to you for advice after a complete disaster in their prep kitchens. Can you share with the listeners what happened and why they called you first for advice?
It's the incarnation of that founder DNA around the table, and we invested in Food Cherry back in 2016, I think. So one of our first investments is actually one of the very few successes in the food tech space in Europe. And Patrick, the founder, one day in his first kitchen took fire, and the first person he called was me, because I think when you talk to him today, it was like I knew you would come with ideas and solutions and support.
Because I have to say, Ben, when there's a fire in your kitchen and your kitchen is your business, it's not very intuitive that the first person you're going to call is the VC, right?
It's just mental, but it proves, how, when you're a founder, you feel lonely a lot of times, right? Because, you just have to manage internally, being always on the hype and making sure that your team is fully behind you and pushing strong. Same story on the outside, that's why there's been a lot of, bullshit around unicorn status and this and that. People have been bragging about it just to show that they're best than the other one. But at the end of the day, you're on your own, and you want someone who's going to understand you, and someone who's not going to be judging you, and someone who's going to be trying to find solutions, and not tell you, damn it, what's your new reforecast? At that point in time, Patrick didn't give a damn about reforecasting. It was like, look, my kitchen's on fire, so what do I do? And so that thing that also proves the sort of different approach. One founder in the UK who I really appreciate, and we backed early on as well, told me, what I like about you is you give me tough love, and I think that was great, because I think that really impersonates what we try to do as a company and what I try to do as an investor. Is like, I'm not going to say everything's rosy when it's not, but I'm not going to let you down. Like, I'm going to be helping you, making it better. And that's what counts, I suppose.
I know, because I've had the privilege of working with you and the team, that when you build out categories, really, one of the things you look for early on is this operational savvy that you're talking about. And as you say, there's lots more to it. The glamorous bit of building a category is coming up with is the bit that Jonathan and I do, which is thinking out how the vision's going to be, et cetera, et cetera. But also the operational savvy is really important. And in fact, I believe you think it's at least as important, if not more important, than this high-level strategy. That's so counterintuitive. Can you explain why?
We all know that an amazing idea without execution is worthless, right? So, I mean, having that vision of, okay, I'm going to build a category leader, I'm going to change the face of the earth. This is crucial. That's this is what we fight for. This is what we want to be doing. And we can't say there aren't any challenges or issues in the world we live in, right? So there are plenty of things to improve. But once you say this, it's like, okay, well, but if it were easy, everyone would do it. So you need to come down to execution, and amazing ideas without execution are worthless. That's why, to me, being able to share your journey as a founder with other founders, is kind of helping them. Obviously, things change, and they've changed rapidly. One of the first companies I created was a DNVB, one of the first ones in Europe, a rugby clothing brand called Rugby Division. And when I look back at the time, there was no Instagram, and there was no, it was only the early days of iPhone. So obviously you don't build a brand like you do today. So I would be, bad at it. But on the way, I've learned so much on, people, organization, incentive, execution, planning, equity story as well, which I think a lot of founders forget about or are not very well advised about. And to me, it's crucial.
You mean like, are you talking about the stack, the preference stack?
Yeah, the entire journey, actually, right? For many years, over the last 10 years, probably, we've heard, raising money and raising at that valuation and this and that. I mean, it felt kind of a game, but it's not. I think ultimately, as a founder, it's your main asset you're actually building, and you want to make sure you build it with the right partners and the right foundation. So if you start raising too much at too high a valuation and you don't grow into this, then you're fucked. Like, I talked to a friend of mine yesterday, and it was kind of a great chat before our conversation this morning. The guy had an offer on the table for an acquisition of his business at $800 million. So you can imagine that, it probably changes your life as an individual and probably changes the lives of your entire team, right? And then a fund, which I'm not going to give the name of, but, gave him a term sheet of 200 million at $1 billion valuation.
Ooh, tempting.
And you know what? The guy took the check, and from there on, it went bonkers, because, when you take a check at that valuation, you need to grow into it. Building an 800 million valuation business is already, fucking kudos. But taking it to 3 billion, because that's what the new guy is actually expecting from you.
Right.
It's putting the company under pressure. It's another order of magnitude in terms of size and growth and pressure to the team. And if anything goes pear-shaped, then you're done. And that's exactly what happened to that business. Don't get me wrong. I think, we as a tech industry must be ambitious, and we need to build big businesses. So don't get me wrong. I'm not like, you should be on the low end. No. We should be thinking big. But at the same time, thinking big means that it needs to be constructed the right way. And we need to make sure that all, interests are aligned, and that, we're not skiing ahead of our skis, basically.
Just wanted to finish this section off a little bit by maybe looking a little bit further forward. I mean, all of us who have worked in tech for decades have spent an awful lot of that time looking for the next big thing, the sort of paradigm that's going to move forward the next set of tech S-curves. We've had a couple recently which have proved so far not to have lived up to the hype. False dawns like blockchain, I think perhaps with a couple of exceptions, and the metaverse, of course, where even Facebook had to eat humble pie. So as we exit the SaaS and mobile eras, which is the third coming of AI? Is it a mega wave, or is this still hype?
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting one. I think, any big wave of innovation requires a new breakthrough in tech, right? And I think the one we've experienced over the last 15 years is all been about mobile on one hand and cloud on the other end, right? It was like that capacity of because for those of you who are old enough to remember, before 2010, you needed to receive a Windows CD-ROM to be able to upgrade your software, right? SaaS has been able to be like, hey, your software is blue today, it's going to be red tomorrow. Your software is doing this today, it's going to be doing this tomorrow, and you don't have to change anything. It's just mental. And a lot of people don't realize the incredible breakthrough, but it's been changing the industry we're in, coming from on-premise to SaaS. And that's one. And then obviously mobile, because we've all been dreaming about connectivity is going to be everywhere, and in the 2000s we went a bit too fast into it. But from 2007 the iPhone, and then 2010 and onwards, everyone is now connected, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And so that connectivity element with cloud created that huge potential for innovation and disruption, which we are still not at the end of. Obviously, a lot of models have been tried and a lot of stuff has been moving, but you'll see a lot of industries still operate very, very old-fashionedly today. So there's still a big chunk of that to be innovated upon. We need a new wave, right? So as much as the internet in 2000, waited for the 2010, I think as of now, AI and quantum computing in the digital space are probably the two things that are going to move the needle the most, right? Because all of a sudden you create that potential brain, of superpower in terms of calculation and ingesting data, which is phenomenal. Obviously, we shouldn't discount the other bit, which is, climate and this bit hasn't been covered yet. There's plenty of industries that need to be rethought entirely in the way they operate, from farming to construction, because we've been doing this, the way we do it today for the last 100 years, and we know it's not working. So in there, we need that new wave of innovation. But in the digital space, yes, of course, and AI, of course, we still need to reduce consumption and make sure that it's not an ecological plague. But the way it operates and the way that we do things, can really change the world we live in.
So it's really mega wave for you. It's we're past hype. This is you're looking at AI in your investments.
Like any new breakthrough technology, there's a bit of a Forrester or Gartner curve, right? So it gets really hype, then comes down, and then back up again, right? So hype cycle, tons of money. People think, it's going to be changing the world tomorrow. No, it's not. Like, it's going to be taking a little bit of time. We now see the complexity of running these models, the cost associated to it, both from a financial but also ecological cost. So these, needs to be improved. But fundamentally, when you think of what it does, you're like, yes, as much as robotics changed, the industry, AI is going to change the service industry. There's no doubt. Like, it's going to be changing a lot of repetitive and basic and cumbersome tasks that, we all do and that we shouldn't be doing, and probably spend our time doing something different, either, more work for those who want to work more and create more and or spend more time with your loved ones.
Think there are too many lookalike tech companies chasing the same markets? We do. We think it's because so few tech startups are able to build and lead their own categories. What matters most is to be different. Stop following and start building your own unassailable leadership position today. Working with the category design gurus at Categorical brings decades of differentiation expertise to your team. Book a consultation from our website today, and we will send you our one-pager detailing how to start designing your own highly differentiated category. Is diversity really a differentiator? And what does diversity in tech actually mean?
And how do you apply it at Breega? Because it strikes me you take a slightly different take on diversity, rooted in the fact that you call Breega contrarian and believe in innovators rather than just vertical markets. So can you talk us through your thinking on diversity and what that means for you at Breega?
Diversity, to me, it's become the sort of new diversity washing a little bit, right? People use it all the time and this and that. If you think of the rationale for it, up until the 40s, probably, we built a world where some people were deciding, for the rest of humankind, right? And it was unfair. So what we need today is real representation. That's what we need. We are, and I think we need it even more in tech, because in tech we are somehow participating in building the future. So if you build the future for the world, then you should be representative of the world in a way, right? Otherwise, you're missing your mission. I mean, you're building a world only with tech bros, and it's not working, right? So that's why, to us at Breega, it's crucial to be able to build teams where diversity is prevalent. And diversity is not only gender and color. It's more than that. A lot of studies today show that there is not so much diversity because there's no social diversity. So yes, first of all, we should be fighting for gender diversity, because, as of today, female people in the world represent more than half of the population. So not having them represented into companies that are actually building the future feels a bit, off. And then social diversity as well, because, if you take only people coming out of Oxford or coming out of a rich family, they will probably look at the world very differently from someone who's not there. That's very important to me and to us at Breega, and it should be important to us in the tech world, where building the future, we should be taking into account all these views of the world to make sure we build a better place for everyone. Investing shouldn't be about trends. It should be about solving the challenges the world is facing, and doing so, applying the best solution at it, and therefore the best tech for it, if you think that tech can solve the problem. And that's why, to us and to me, it's crucial to. It's very important to invest into visionary people who want to change their industry. I don't care about, this is the new hot blockchain company, or this is the new hot, LLM company. I don't give a damn. I mean, to me, it's like, what do you want to do with this? What do you want to change? What do you think that in today's world is not working the way it should? And why should we change it? Why should I spend my time as an investor and my money? Why should I spend the next 10 years with you in the trenches to actually build this business? Well, it's because I believe it's changing the status quo, not just because it's cool and I'm going to a dinner VC and I'm like, oh, guys, I invested in the new blockchain. I don't care.
Diversity isn't just ethically the right thing to do, but your research says that the firms which are more diverse perform better financially.
They do. I mean, we've got to be 10 years into Breega next year. We've gathered amazing, a big amount of data on, our now more than 100 portfolio companies. And when you measure, and so we did it internally. So once again, a lot of people, talk the talk, we walk the walk. We measured all of our portfolio companies, and their financial performance versus their diversity and overall ESG conscience. And the ones that are there are actually do perform better. And they do perform better because their people internally are more motivated. Their client externally feel more represented, and they kind of understand the positioning and the mission better. So they're happy to pay more. You're happy to pay more for a pair of Veja shoes because they're cleaner, because they're better. And that's why these companies and, the Patagonias of this world are doing better. They're doing better because they're building better. And therefore, clients and the entire world is taking them to the high. So we have data showing it. And that's why it's part of our process today. There's not a single company that we invest in that doesn't go through our own impact analysis. And, if it's not a green light, it's a no-go.
Yeah, I noticed too recently that you did turn down investments in fintech, essentially on ethical grounds. I remember you using the phrase, they were not operating fairly. Can you take us through that judgment?
Look, it's obviously all very personal. And as you said, it's a judgment that is only one you can apply to yourself. And, I'm not judging people ultimately. I'm judging the business I want to support and put money and time in. But yes, when I see fintech companies, charging 50% or 100% APRs, I'm like, is it really right? Is that really the right way to do things? Are we sophisticated enough to find other options? Probably. So, once again, do I want to spend my money and time on this one? There are better things to be doing. Like, I prefer spending money, we were investors in a company called O11H down in Spain. These guys are revolutionizing the way we build houses and flats with a different approach to what has been going in the construction world for the last 100 years. Is it complicated? Yes. Is it painful? Yes. Is it a straight go? No. Do you have SaaS metrics like your MRR is growing every month? No. But are you building something which is going to change the entire category? Yes. And this is what I like about it, is like spending my resources onto something we can really impact the world we live in. And thankfully enough, I do this with amazing people. The founders were back, they created a business previously that they sold for $600 million. I mean, if there's a team that can actually do it, it's them. And yes, there's risk attached to it. But to me, it's way more interesting than the usual enterprise software piece, where I'm not saying it's not great, and some of them are phenomenal. But the question I always ask myself is like, are we really moving the needle?
Yeah, this is really interesting because I think you guys, for diversity for you also means diversity of types of investments. You have B2B and B2C, which in itself is unusual. We talked earlier about you believe in the innovator, that it's a people first, founder first ideology, not vertical markets. We don't need the sixth fintech doing exactly the same thing as the last piece. And is part of this, Ben, the fact that you guys really focus on deep tech? It's not the superficial, you're going deep. Is this part of your diversity?
Of course, it's part of the diversity. I think it's part of the diversity, and we see it in our performance because our portfolio is diverse. We are in the top decile investment funds in Europe, right? We give back money to our LPs when the rest of the market is tanked. And why is that? It's because you build a diverse portfolio. It's because you're trying to evaluate different opportunities. You keep your mind open as well. I mean, there's nothing worse than an investor who's been doing, the same thing for 20 years and then comes at a business and is like, it's never going to work. Well, it's never going to work until it works and until someone, does it. So having that diversity of investment also creates better performance ultimately. And that's why, on one hand, there are services or status quo that could be challenged with, just incremental innovation. And, we're happy to back these if we think they really move the needle. On the other end of the spectrum, we've never been afraid of backing deep tech businesses when we think that there is no piece of technology working as of today that can, move the needle as it should. And so therefore, if the investment must be into hardcore tech, well, then we do it. And, we've been investors in Exotech, the first, industrial unicorn in Europe and in France. We are investors in Alice and Bob in the quantum computing space. Yes, it's risky. Yes, it's complicated. Yes, it's different. But that diversity in our portfolio, in our approach, gives us a different perspective on things and ultimately performance.
Right, Ben, we're going to ask you to look in your crystal ball. And I think you see a little bit further than most people. What do you see in the future with your crystal ball?
When you look at what the situation we're in Europe today, we have a non-growing economy and a non-growing population, which means that a lot of companies we see are actually fighting against incumbents, right? So it's like it's a zero-sum game where you try to take a piece of the cake of someone else.
It's a wallet share scramble.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Versus other growing economies around us. And the biggest one with, which Europe has had the stronger ties forever, and particularly the UK and France, is just across the Med. It's Africa, right? If you look at the map of the world, the next billion people on the planet are going to come from Africa. And either we are able to feed, to educate, to put a roof over the head of these people and create a sustainable economy and world, or it's going to be a disaster because, everyone deserves a decent living. If they don't find it in their own country, they will flee. That's what it is. And that's what we are seeing today. So, once again, building a better world as Europeans, we should be highly investing into Africa. And not for them, obviously, for us, for everyone, for the entire planet, right? And this will require innovation in tech. If you get 1 billion people in the next 20 years, that's 50 million a year, like 50 million people you need to send to school. You can't actually even build these schools. It's impossible, right? So it needs to be tech-driven. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster. So to me, I see a huge potential. Obviously, it's not going to be easy. Obviously, you're starting from a lower base. Obviously, a lot of the infrastructure is not there and it's not in place. So you need to rebuild and rethink a lot of stuff. But the reason why we launched an Africa dedicated fund earlier this year is that there is a tremendous potential. It's a very young population, very creative, very connected. And so it's the perfect environment for innovation. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I was in Lagos 2 weeks ago. Wow, it's crazy.
As I guess the listeners will have worked out by now, you ain't going to be looking in your crystal ball without actually doing something about it. So you've actually been investing in Africa.
Yes, once again, I put my money where my mouth is, right? Otherwise I don't do things, or I shut up. The African ecosystem is obviously still very nascent, so you have to go for the big markets first. And that's why I was so vocal about Europe, because big markets make big companies and category leaders that can transform their industry. So in Africa, as of today, the four biggest economies are Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Kenya. Very soon Morocco, I hope, which is the fifth one, and he's lagging behind a little bit like Italy in Europe when it comes to tech. So yes, these are the major markets we're looking at, and we have people on the ground in Nigeria and South Africa. We're open to invest all across. There are amazing founders. A lot of them repats, by the way. People who've been abroad, been educated in some of the best universities out there. I've been working at some of the best tech companies out there, and then come back to their own country with that experience and will to change the world. And we've invested in Senegal very recently, a company called Socium, and the team is just phenomenal. So it's a booming ecosystem, and it's fascinating to see what people do to change their day to day.
If I'm a potential LP, I'm listening to someone who's actually, as you say, boots on the ground, actual money invested. This isn't just aspirational. Like, this is real stuff.
Back to your question earlier, I think there's the big vision, which is great, and you need to have one as a CEO, as a founder, as a tech entrepreneur. But you need to be executing, right? You need to be down on the ground and be like, look, the vision's great, but it's only going to be great if we do stuff, right? If we actually execute on that vision. And to me, yes, there are going to be changes. Yes, finally the economy is going to be down and this and that. But ultimately, if you have the drive and the passion to make things change, well, then you do. Otherwise, you just sit in front of the TV and talk about it.
It's also sort of interesting that, if people didn't really think it through, one might think that where investments need to be targeted would be, say, agri-tech, ed-tech, health tech. But the problem is if you don't have the technologies that underpin the critical infrastructure on which that will work, fintech, logistics, mobility, energy and climate, then none of it's really going to work. So, in terms of what sort of checks are you writing, and for what sort of stages of companies? And what about, getting the follow-on investors in there?
So in Europe, because, the majority of our investments are still in Europe, obviously, between London and Paris. And we do early stage up to Series B. So, we're happy to take risk at sort of, 2 people in the garage kind of stage up to a few millions of revenue. And in Africa, obviously, the ecosystem isn't as advanced, right? So you have to do a lot of early stage. Any ecosystem is like a pyramid, right? You can't pretend you're going to be investing late stage when it's still early days, because A, there's not enough companies, and B, you're overpricing them. And then you go back to my point around equity story is just ruined. So we do early stage stuff, tickets from a few hundreds to a few millions. We love being the first investor in the business and acting as a real partner alongside the founders. And yes, we need to make the two move together. A lot of people have only thought about fintech in developing markets. Yes, to build an economy, you need to be able to pay. You need to be able to move people and goods. And you need to be able to connect if you want to have, a digital economy. So these are the 4 things you need to be doing. But on top of that, once you have that sort of first layer, then you can build the rest. Then you can build food and education and services and anything that makes the lives of people better. So we do this in parallel. And yes, some of our first investments in Africa have been in fintech and energy as well, because these are pillars to build the rest of the economy on top of. And then, yes, we're doing, some social and HR solutions for employees to get advance payment, for instance, which is crucial in the economy where there's no lending, or solutions for merchants to actually build their businesses. We're looking at a company today that provides a solution to improve and optimize for your energy consumption, for instance, in countries where oil can go from 100 to 200 a liter in 2 days. All of that are issues do you see locally that you need to solve for, and are going to be improving the foundation for the economy to thrive.
Thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about Ben Marrel and Breega, then you can go to www.breega.com. That's with 2 E's. And you can also read an informative piece on Ben's new Africa fund, courtesy of our friends at www.sifted.eu. Links are in the show notes. If you're wondering how category design can turbocharge your investment strategy, then we can help. Get in touch with us. You can find our contact details, again, in the show notes.